And in that moment, when they get knocked down, right, it's not their ability to do skills. It's not their ability to hold habits that gets them, right? What gets them in that moment is their mindset, right? It's their mindset. They start to have some negative self-doubt or negative self-talk. They have like self-doubt. They tell themselves that they can't do it, or maybe that the next try they do will be a better one, that now's not the right time, right? So they start filling up their head with all of this negative self-talk. And I think that we as business people, we do the same thing, right? Sometimes we set our goal too high.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Coach the CEO podcast. I'm your host, I'm Chris Lingham, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to keep pushing when things start to get hard. All right, so I was thinking about my next episode, and I had a few days where I was just kind of working on building out some of the systems and things of that nature, and I was excited about getting back and shooting a podcast, but oftentimes when you're trying to balance everything in life, it becomes a little bit of a challenge, and I thought that that would be a really great topic to kind of talk about today, because one of the obstacles that you're going to face when you are running your business, whether you're running a gym or you're just running a business and you just wanted to hear a podcast on business, whatever brings you here to this show, I think it's really important to understand that there's going to be times where you're going to be required to show up even when you don't feel like you want to, right? Maybe you don't feel like you have the energy. Maybe you don't feel like you have the motivation. Maybe you don't feel like you have the time, right? But you still have to figure out a way to keep pushing even when things get difficult, even when things are starting to get hard, right? And one of the things I wrote down in my notes here, so you're going to see me looking down at my book, because today I wrote a lot of notes, and I didn't want to miss out on anything, and I didn't want to mess up the way that I said it, right? Because I think that it was, if you would, profound when I wrote it down. So I wanted to make sure that I captured it and was able to deliver this message to you in the way that when it first popped in my brain. So I said, the other day I wrote this down. I said, things will always be hard. Hard is an indication that you're on the right track. All right, I'm going to say that again. Things will always be hard, right? In fact, hard is an indication that you are on the right track. I want you to think back into different times in your life when you were doing something, you were taking on a challenge, and I'm sure you were faced with some obstacles, right? I even think about when I'm working with coaching clients and we're trying to help them transform, to help them lose weight, to help them get fit, to help them change their life and transform. We all have this process, right? This process in place, this system. Well, I hope we do, right? Maybe that's why you're on this show, because you want to get better at your processes and your systems, right? But there's still a way that you do things, right? And a lot of times we tend to think that we're better, right, than the people that we work with. And I don't just say that lightly. Hear me out on it. I don't mean that like we think we're better than other people. It's that our approach and how we do things kind of show that. All right, here's what I mean. I'll get somebody that comes in, say they're working with me with nutrition and training, right? And they have a really busy life. They're deconditioned. They haven't been hitting the gym or working out in a while, and they're just starting to get back into the swing of things, right? One of the first things that I'm going to do with them is I'm going to set some baseline goals, right? I'm going to set some goals to see if they can hit these goals and we can build on them, right? And good coaches, right? Good coaches know that we're not going to start off with macros, right? We're not going to start off with having them do hang cleans or deadlifts and things like that. We're going to teach them the foundational movements, right? We're going to teach them skill sets like going shopping or maybe planning. Like, we wouldn't just go from 0 to 100, right? We wouldn't say, here's your calories, here's your macros, here's your meal plan, you got to stick to this, or else you're not going to have success, right? We wouldn't do that. So I think it's important that when we look at ourselves, that we don't do the same thing, right? Because a lot of us have had a lot of success in different areas in our life, so we tend to make our goals in areas where we're trying to grow we tend to make our goals the same way some people will have their fitness goals, right? Somebody comes in and say, I can work out 5 days a week, right? This is like a conversation that I'll have with somebody. Like, how many days a week you want to commit to working out? And they're like, I can do 5. And I always joke, I'm like, you haven't trained in our system yet, right? Because I know that, like, they're going to be sore. Like, day 3, you know, they're going to feel like they got hit by a Mack truck. They're going to be sitting down on a toilet. Their butt's going to be sore, right? Their quads, you know, it's going to be hard to put on their shirt. You know, I know that these things are going to happen. We've worked with enough people. We've sent enough people through the system that, you know, that day 3, day 4 soreness when you haven't been working out in a while, it hits. And when that hits, you're not going to be able to go to the gym, right? Or say you get a week and a half in or 2 weeks in and that energy switch, right? Where in the beginning you have all this excitement and motivation. So you're like going every day, but then your body's burning more calories, right? And you're not eating enough food. So your body starts to slow down on you and you start to get demotivated and you don't show up, right? So these are the things that we know, right? This is just basic exercise physiology. So as a coach, we know these things, right? We understand exercise physiology. So we're not going to have somebody start off 5 days a week and think they're going to be successful or be sustainable with that, because their body is going to have these adaptations along the way, which are going to knock them back down, right? And in that moment, when they get knocked down, right? It's not their ability to do skills. It's not their ability to hold habits that gets them, right? What gets them in that moment is their mindset, right? It's their mindset. They start to have some negative self-doubt or negative self-talk. They have like self-doubt. They tell themselves that they can't do it, or maybe that the next try they do will be a better one, that now's not the right time, right? So they start filling up their head with all of this negative self-talk. And I think that we as business people, we do the same thing, right? Sometimes we set our goal too high. In business, right, we were like, we're going to work out 5 days a week. But the analogy is like, imagine what that would look like in business, right? It's like setting goals. I used to set bad goals when it would come to like bringing in members. I'd be like, I'm going to do, 45, or I'm going to do like 35 clients this quarter, right? And if I looked back at the last quarter, I didn't have that, or I didn't even have close to that, right? Maybe I only had like 15 members in the last quarter. So when we were getting ready to set our goal, we get ambitious. We're like, I'm going to get 35 new clients this next quarter, and I'm going to crush it. Why? Because like last quarter, I just wasn't feeling it, but this quarter, I'm going to push myself harder, and therefore, I'm going to hit my goal. And the reality is, there's reasons why you fell off. And unless you start to address those, right, and unless you start to create some foundation around that and some consistency, you're not going to be able to overcome your goal. So why set it at 35? If you did 15 in the last quarter, it's unrealistic, right? So we always talk about setting smart goals, but we in business tend to set these unrealistic goals for ourselves and we let ourselves down. So one of the things that I really wanted to stress on this episode was like how I coach my clients, I try to do with myself, right? And it's hard, right? It's really hard because I still have that mindset that I can do anything, right? So we have to sometimes take it back a notch, right? Check our ego at the door and really just set it at based on the information that we have, right? So if you can look back at yourself and your past performance, you're gonna be able to evaluate yourself, and that really takes a lot because you have to be able to have some good understanding of who you are and what you're capable of doing, right? So if you're gonna set a goal, you gotta look back. You gotta look back at your last 90 days. Like, what have I done in my last 90 days, right? And the goal should be either to maintain that or improve it, right? Slightly improve it. Because if someone's coming in deconditioned and they tell me they're gonna work out 5 times, what am I gonna tell them? All right, I wanna see you 2 times, right? Because I know the secret, right? I know the secret that if I get them to come in 2 times, or I have them commit to 2 times, that they're gonna hit that, right? They're gonna hit that goal. And what might actually happen is that they come in 3 times, right? And if they do come in 3 times, what is that going to do for them psychologically, right? It's going to take their self-esteem to a whole nother level. It's going to create more inspiration or intrinsic motivation for them, right? Because coach said all I have to do is 2. I was able to do 3. Hashtag beast mode, right? I'm crushing it. And that's how we got to look at it. Like, that's how we got to look at our own goals. Allow ourselves to be proud of ourselves, right? So going back to how do you keep pushing when things get hard? Because there's going to be days where you can work 8 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours, right? And when I look at my week, I don't, I hate to be like, oh, hashtag no days off, but that is a strategy that I use because I try not to allow, like, people get the case of the Mondays all the time, right? Or it's like, it's Friday and they're ready to take the weekend off, right? I never allow a day to be different than a different day, right? And that's tough because I am a Christian, so I do, try to take it easy on Sundays, right? I try to make sure that I'm giving my attention to where it belongs on a Sunday. But at the same time, I still treat Sunday like a Wednesday or a Friday or a Tuesday for that matter, right? I'm going to show up. I'm going to do some work. I'm going to do something that day to get me moving forward, right? So if you're sick, if you're tired, if you are hungover, right? I don't drink anymore, but even when I did back in the day, that was no excuse to miss work, right? Because if you can show up on those days, it's going to make you that much better on the days that you feel good, right? So how I do this is that I at least do 1 hour every day, right? 7 days a week. There's no exception, right? There's no exception. When I first opened my gym, I remember I used to tout this that I worked, it was like 463 days straight without a day off, right? It was the beginning days. I was in grind mode and I was doing whatever it took, right? And later on in my career, I took a little bit more time off when I needed, but early on in those days, I didn't feel like I had that opportunity to do that. I felt like any day that I was taking time off or resting, and don't get me wrong, you got to rest, right? But I felt like if I wasn't doing something, that I was falling behind because everyone else, they already had an advantage over me. They already had things. They already had systems. They already had members. They already had all the equipment, right? Back then, I was training clients on carpet. I didn't even have turf or any rubber flooring. We had a Rogue rack, right? I had a carpet and a couple TRXs, kettlebells, dumbbells, a few things like that. And that's how I was making it happen, right? So I didn't have the opportunity or the luxury to be able to just take weekends off and hang out. So early on, I just worked every day. And I think that's something that I had from baseball and football. It was just a mentality where it's like, get better every day, get better every day, right? So I took that sports analogy and I brought it into business, and I still do it to this day. Maybe not as an extreme, but if I at least do 1 hour every single day, I'm getting ahead, right? I'm not getting ahead of somebody else, right? I'm not competing with other people, but I am competing with myself, right? And that's important, right? If you allow yourself to compete with the past version of yourself, everyone else is trying to catch up to you, right? There's no need to be looking at the guy or the girl next to you because you're just focused on yourself. You're focused on being a better version of yourself. You're focused on improving who you used to be, and most importantly, proving to yourself, right, that you got it, that you deserve it, right? That all the success that's going to come your way is because of the work that you put in, right? When you do that, you leave no doubt, right? I think a lot of times people get into self-doubt. And I think it has a lot to do with just because there's a part of them that knows that they're not trying as hard as they could, right? And I'm not saying that you got to go, like I said, 9, 10, 15 hours a day. But what if you just said, I'm going to go 1 hour a day, every single day. I'm going to treat my Saturday like it's a Thursday, and I'm going to commit to that, right? How far would you be if you did that, right? Because guess what? Some days, those 1 hours, they turn into really, really good days, right? Some days I might cut it at 3. Some days I just do the bare minimum of that 1. But I know that I made a decision to help myself win that day, and I've earned the right to rest, right? Get that? I'm going to say that again. I've earned the right to rest, right? I mean, I think so many times we party, we rest, we take days off, we go on vacations, and we haven't earned it, right? We haven't earned the right to do it. So I'm going to help you adjust that mindset, right? You got to earn the right to rest. All right, so another one that I wrote down was that if things feel easy, you're not on the right track, right? Because like we get upset when things are getting hard, right? We get frustrated when things feel hard, right? But what I said earlier was things will always be hard, and hard is an indication that you're on the right track. So that must also mean that the absence of difficulty equals more of an indicator that you're going the wrong way, right? The absence of difficulty is more of an indicator that you're going the wrong way. See, if things are getting easy, that means you're not challenging yourself. And what we always tell our clients, if you're not challenging yourself, you ain't changing, right? If you don't challenge, you don't change. So when I have my client come in and they're telling me 4 days a week, that's great. You're ready to challenge yourself. I'm going to set the bar somewhere where you can actually achieve, and we're going to crush it. So we're going to do 2 days a week. All right, we're going to check in 3 weeks. And we're going to make sure that we hit at least those 2 days. If you want to come more, you're allowed to come more, but you got to give me 2. Right? That's what we're going to commit to. And they'll be like, all right, we check in 3 weeks. And what happens? We look back at the average. How many days did they come in? There's some weeks they only came in 2, right? Maybe 1 week they came in 2, but there's 2 out of those 3 weeks that they came in 3 times. So how do you think they feel? They feel like they've been able to conquer something. They feel proud because people will let themselves down, but they won't let their coach down. So you're giving them an opportunity to feel proud of themselves. Right? And most of us, we deal with issues with negative self-talk, negative self-doubt, right? When we allow ourselves to be proud of ourselves, it is a huge mental boost. So when someone finishes a task, it's a huge dopamine hit, and that's going to drive them to more success. So that's what I look at when I'm working with somebody, whether that's in transformation, whether that's in just mentorship. If I'm just having a conversation with somebody at the store, I try to leave them better, right? I try to give them that boost because I know that every single day people are really struggling to get that boost for themselves. And I've been lucky enough to be able to create systems and a mindset that I can get that boost. And when I don't have it, my wife is really good at making sure I get it too, right? We pick each other up. And that's what being on a team is all about, right? You got to surround yourself with people that want to see you win. And you got to be able to get into that environment and make yourself better. That's why I love coaching, right? I love helping people get better. I like seeing that progress, right? So I'm going to set you up to win. And I talk about it in our nutrition coaching. I want 3 wins and an obstacle every coaching call, right? So if I sit down with you before we fix any problems that you're having throughout the week, I want 3 wins. I want you to give me 3 dubs, right? Because we're chasing dubs, baby. We're like, what's Jamie Swinston? He's always like eating W's on the sideline for the Giants, right? We're chasing W's. All right, every single day we're trying to get that win. That's 1 hour. So back to setting that goal. I'm not going to set a 35-member goal if I've done 15 the last quarter. Maybe I'm going to set the goal at, all right, let's hit 15 again, right? Because what happens? If I set the goal at 15, that's 5 a month. If I get 6 one month, that's great. If I get 7 another month, that's awesome. If I hit 5 the last month, I at least hit my goal, right? But when I look back, right, what does that put me at, right? That puts me at 3 over my goal. That puts me at 18, right? So when you sometimes, I know it's tough, but like we think about raising the bar all the time, and I'm all about raising the bar, but sometimes we got to raise it just a little bit, right? We got to lower our expectations of what we actually think we can do because sometimes we self-sabotage, right? We sabotage ourselves before we even get started by setting the bar too high sometimes, right? So moving on. When I'm looking to get some motivation, right? When I'm dying out, when I'm burnt out, right? If I've been working a long time and I haven't stepped out, I do this exercise that really helps me. I'm going to teach you today, and I'm going to give you some examples, right? I call it going back to key moments, right? Going back to key moments. When I first got started, when I was in exercise science down in Georgia, I remember we were in a class. It was my junior year. It was called Exercise Leadership, and we had a project where we had to build a facility, right? We had to create staffing, what we were going to do, what was going to be the service that we provided. And I remember everyone was doing like YMCAs and community centers, and I created a gym, right? I created a gym that was going to be athletic, performance-based, right? And we were going to train athletes, we were going to train adults, and that the adults would be motivated by watching the athletes, right? And athletes would feel this sense of pride, being able to help these other adults feel even better, right? Because they knew that they had other people that were looking up to them. So it created this like symbiotic relationship where everyone was winning because everyone had some contribution to everyone else's success, right? So that was my project that I created. I created it on a notebook. It was bigger than this notebook, but it was literally 2 pages, right? And then I look back, and that was in 2010, I believe. And 2013, I opened the doors to my facility, right? But I started training people before that, right? And you're going to hear in a second, right? But in 2013, I had my own facility, my first facility, and that's what it was, right? We trained adults, we trained athletes, and I'm telling you this because this is about manifestation, right? This isn't no I know people talk about this all the time, but sometimes you gotta write it down. You gotta be able to visualize. You gotta visualize your future, right? What do you want? Where do you want to go? How do you want to achieve things, right? What kind of progress do you want to see happen? So I wrote this out back in Exercise Leadership, and a couple years ago, I was talking to one of my friends that I went to school with, and she was at an ACSM conference, and one of my professors, Dr. B, he was there because he's all about that ACSM world. And they were talking, and they said, "Hey, do you remember when Chris used to talk about, like opening up a gym?" And she was just like, "Can you believe it? He actually did it." And when I had this conversation with her, man, I just took a step back because I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." Number one, I don't even remember having those conversations, but you guys do. And the fact that you're seeing it, you're watching it, and then now you're talking about it, that just made me feel so cool in that moment, because I was like, I know that sometimes you don't understand who's watching. You don't know who you're actually inspiring to make sure that they keep going in whatever journey they're in. Maybe, my friend Sasha wasn't trying to open up a gym, right? But that little bit of push that I kept going and kept moving towards my goals, and that I talked about them early on, gave her the motivation to continue on in her journey, right? So that's important. You got to work hard because you don't know who's watching. Right? You got to make sure that maybe it's your kids that are watching you show up every single day. I know my kid, she watches me work out. She watches me work. In fact, when I walk out of this room, she's going to scream to me, "Daddy, are you done?" Right? Because she knows it's work time, right? She knows the work that we got to put in for our family, right? So the next one, I think back to my shed. My shed, I talk about it a lot in different videos. So if this is the first time you're hearing, when I first started training people, I used my parents' backyard. It was a shed. It was a rickety shed because it had been around for years. But this is all I had. I had that, a kettlebell, and a couple pieces of weight equipment in there, and that's how I started my business. It was in my parents' backyard. And I was posting videos on Facebook to get people's attention, and they started to work with me. And it was in the shed. It was the early days of Impact that I was able to start helping people change their lives, and which kind of catapulted me into being able to own my own facility, right? To be able to run my own facility. The next place that I went to was a studio. It was a couple towns away, and I was renting space with some other cats. And I was training people there, right? And the problem was when I left my shed and I went there, people didn't want to make the drive, right? So I had my first obstacle, which was that half of the people that I was training didn't go with me. Right? And that's another lesson, right? Not everyone's going to get to go with you all the time. You got to have the confidence to keep going, right? You got to have the confidence to start over, right? And that was an early lesson on that, because a lot of the members that I had, they couldn't come with me. It was too far of a drive. They wished me well, and I wished them well, but we went our separate ways, and I had to rebuild. I had to rebuild a new place. And in that place, when I would drive to go to that gym, I would cross over to town that my gym would later be in, and there was a building, and I would go up into the windows every single day, and I would stare in the windows, right? Because it was on my way to work, so either on the way there or on the way home, I would just go to the window, and I would stare in these windows, and I would just like, there was nothing in there. It was dark, so you couldn't even really see, but I envisioned like training clients, right? I was like, this is where they're going to warm up. This is where we're going to do their mobility routine, right? Over there, we're going to have circuits. We're going to have weight training going on over here, right? This is where my front desk is going to be, right? And I would just like go every single day. It was almost like if someone was watching me, they probably thought I was crazy, because I was literally just staring in the window every single day, right? And I did this for months. And then finally that day came where I was able to, take that next step. I got that, a couple people that supported me early on, gave me that motivation, and they helped me get that first step to be able to open that facility and get in there and start training people, right? And I never will forget that, right? But I'll never forget the process. I'll never forget each one of those moments when I look back. So a lot of times when I would be training in that gym, I would get into my head and I'd be thinking about where I want to go. So I would drive over a couple towns to my old gym, and I would go watch, and I would go look in the windows there, right? I remember when I was outside running sprints in the parking lot, and I would just walk around, right? And I would just feel it out, and I would just get that energy, and it would be a reminder. I'd say, this is where you used to be. I was like, if I had any self-doubt about where I wanted to go, I would go back to where I used to be, and I would get evidence, right? I would get evidence and say, this is who you used to be. This is where you used to be. If you were there and now you're here, this means that you can continue to move forward. You just got to get your head in the right place, and you got to keep going, right? So sometimes that's how you keep pushing when things get hard, is that you got to go back to a version of yourself that you were. Because if we look back 5 years ago, we're way better than we used to be. If we look back a decade ago, we are 10 times better than we used to be, right? And if you're not, well then, you probably shouldn't even be watching this, right? But hopefully if you are, if you're not and you're watching this, it's going to help you flip the script, right? It's going to help you get motivated. Now, my last one that I leave you with, right? My last one that I leave you with, because I wanted to keep this one a little bit shorter today. Success in business comes to those that never quit. Success in business comes to those who never quit. All right, I'm reminded of a story about R.B. Darby, I believe his name is. Right, don't quote me on the letter part of it, but his name was Darby. Right, he was a gentleman from Maryland, and it was during the gold rush. He decided that he wanted to go out and try and strike it big, so he went out west. I think it was around Colorado area. Don't quote me on that, but he ended up going out and purchased some digging equipment, so that he could start digging for gold, right? Everybody out there was looking for gold, looking to strike it rich, right? And the funny story is that all the people that actually got rich were the people that sold the shovels, but that's for a different story. That's a different day. But he was out there and he was digging and he was digging and he got lucky, right? He got lucky. He all of a sudden hits this ore of gold, right? He finds this vein and he's just like, oh, wow. So he's digging and he's pulling it out of the ground. He's pulling it out of the ground, and he's like, oh, wow, this is the mother lode. I got to cover this up. I got to go get some equipment. I need to get more equipment and some more help to be able to get this gold out of the ground. So he goes home, gets a bunch of people, gets everyone to chip in a ton of money, invest. He's like, man, we're going to be filthy rich. I just need to buy the excavators. I need to be able to get the wagons and everything that we need. And he's like, once we're able to pay, I'm going to be able to pay you guys back, and we're going to be having enough to be rich. So he gets all the equipment, he gets the help, he goes back out. They're digging, and he's pulling out, and he finally hits a point where he's able to actually break even, right? Pays for all the equipment, and he keeps going, and all of a sudden, the vein of gold disappears. He's scratching his head. They keep digging. They're still finding nothing. He's scratching his head. He's just like, this can't be it. This can't be it. Finally, he decides, I don't know, maybe we need to cut our losses. Maybe we need to just call it. We already paid for the equipment. We can just sell the equipment. We'll at least come out making a little bit of money. So he goes to a junker, right? He goes to his junkyard, sells all of his equipment to the junkyard guy. Junkyard guy wasn't just some dumb old junkyard. He ends up, looking at a map. And the difference was between him and Darby, who's a little bit more skilled, a little bit more knowledgeable on maps. And one thing that Darby wasn't knowledgeable was fault lines. So as he's looking at the map and he understands where the fault lines are and how it works, he realizes that Darby was digging in the wrong spot. That he was digging, and when it ended, he needed to actually go 3 feet to the left. And the junkyard guy takes all the equipment that he just bought from Darby, goes 3 feet to the left, and he continues to dig, and he ends up getting rich. Later on, Darby's back in Maryland. Now, he ends up to be a very successful man. He goes on to sell insurance, and he uses this moment as a lesson for himself, right? He becomes very successful in selling insurance, and the reason why he closed all the sales that he did was that he said he never would say let no be an answer anymore, right? Because he remembered that he quit 3 feet from gold before, and he was never going to let that happen again. So he ended up using this experience as a lesson to be able to help drive him to be very successful in a different area. But I think about this too, is that every time that I feel like I'm right about to give up, right? I'm right about to quit, I always think about this story and how sometimes I need to pivot. I need to pivot 3 feet to the left. And if I do, I'm going to find my gold. And that's what I leave you with today, guys. Is that sometimes in business, you're going to feel like you're stuck. And you got to find out a way to be able to step out so that you can get your mind right, get your head clear, and get back in the game. Because the game only ends when you stop playing. All right, I'm going to say that again. The game only ends when you stop playing. So continue on, guys. Keep pushing. Keep making the rest of your life the best of your life. I hope this podcast helped you guys. Make sure to go down into the comments and the show notes. Download the free guide that I have in there. It's called The 7 Biggest Mistakes That Gym Owners Make and How to Fix Them Before You Burn Out. All right, it's going to be very helpful. I put together this resource for you guys to be able to make sure that I could give you guys something for free of high value that you could plug and play right away and actually start making some things happen. All right, and the rest of you guys, if you're looking to take a little bit of a deeper dive and work with me personally in our mentorship, I put together a 12-month license and mentorship, install all of our business systems in for you. This is your training system, your marketing, your fulfillment, your client journey, everything that you can think of, how to upsell people into nutrition coaching. We've got that all together in a package deal to be able to help you take your gym to multiple six figures, and some of you even seven figures if you got what it takes and you have that grind. Guys, once again, thank you for checking out this episode. The link to that guide and to the mentorship will be in the comments section, the description and the show notes. And like always, make sure to, if this was something that you really enjoyed, give me a thumbs up to be able to help me out with the algorithm and push this out to more people. Share this with somebody who you think it can help. Leave me a comment, guys, because I love being able to jump into the comments with you guys and go back and forth. If you have any questions or if there's anything particular in this episode that you wanted me to talk a little bit more about, I'd be happy to explain in the comment section. Thank you guys again for checking out the episode. This was Coach to CEO Podcast, and I look forward to seeing you guys on future shows.